Unveiling the COVID-19 lies with Dr. Bryan Ardis.
Tell a big lie and tell it often enough, and people will eventually believe it. It's become very obvious since the COVID-19 pandemic, just using drugs to mask symptoms, when everything I learned was you can do with nature what they pretend to do with drugs. You've all heard that the word virus in Latin means poison, especially of snake's venom. It's become very obvious since the COVID-19 pandemic. I have been lied to my entire life by the medical profession.
Also on the other side too, there's a lot of really great doctors.
Correlation does not equal causation. Break that phrase down, because that is the excuse they give when they say our drug didn't cause X.
It just gets deeper and deeper. It's easier to fool people than it is to convince them they've been fooled. Because when you give the body the tools, it will do the job.
Hi, I'm Dr. Bryan Ardis, and I'm here with Human Garage. And in this episode, I'm so excited and thrilled to answer questions from the audiences, from those interviewing me, which will be exciting. The entire episode, we're going to be dropping solutions and antidotes that will bring hope to millions around the world. And we hope you'll share this with those that you know are suffering far and wide.
Brian, it's great, and I brought my friends because we want to gang up and ask a bunch of questions. The conversation that we had has gone completely viral. We've got like 40 some odd, maybe 50 million views, and we have people ripping it off with tens of millions of views. So it's probably had 100 million views, and since we published it about a month ago. We have been practicing internally some of the recommendations. And to go even further back, like nicotine has not been a new thing in the health space. It's been there for a while, but I wasn't practicing it on a regular basis. That's brought up more questions. We have questions from the audience that we want to clear out, and we had a lot of haters coming up and trying to pick at it, which is really good because that drives.
I love that. Yeah,
I love the haters. In case somebody hasn't watched the first podcast we did, can you just tell us a little bit about your background and give the reference again, and then we'll get right into it.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Bryan Ardis, and I'm actually a retired chiropractor, acupuncturist, and nutritionist. I actually decided as a child I was going to be a marine biologist or a basketball player, but then I'm the oldest of 5 children, and my youngest sibling actually was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease when she was 11, and the prognosis that the medical profession had given my parents about my sister's autoimmune disease, what they gave as far as information about her future, it really bothered me. I didn't like the fact that there was no known cure. They couldn't tell you there was any known cause. I mean, they actually said this out loud. We don't know what causes this condition. We don't know how to cure it. But there's only 3 prescription drugs that this child will be on for the rest of her life, and it might ultimately end her life by the age of 40. And I remember thinking to myself when I heard my parents relaying this to me, I was 21, and I remember telling myself, I'm not going to let that profession kill my sister because they don't know what's wrong with her. Just using drugs to mask symptoms, when to me I was very shocked that the medical profession I assumed had been around for over 100 years had already established through scientific research what are the known causes for symptoms and diseases. So I decided at that moment at age 21 I was going to become a doctor of some sort, and I decided I was going to be a medical doctor because I didn't really know about any other doctors, but I thought I'd get into the realm of research, only to discover that primarily the research that's conducted in medical universities and medical schools is actually funded by Big Pharma to determine lethal doses of medications in animals, mice, rats, before they extend dosages for human trials. Well, for me, that's not actually researching the underlying root causes of diseases, which I thought the medical profession was doing. So I actually sidestepped that in a few occurrences when I was a young parent of a 4-month-old for the first time. This kid had all kinds of problems. We were told he was colicky. We told this is normal. But for the first 4.5 months of his life, he literally screamed 24/7 at the top of his lungs. And you've heard babies when they're in pain or fall, and they cry with that cry. They can't even inhale. They're crying so hard. This is how he was from the time he woke up to the time he went to bed. We went to 9 or so different pediatricians in a 4-month period. They had actually put him on 4 different antibiotics at one time, 4 different doctors. The 4th one actually put him into a grand mal seizure within 2 minutes of me giving it to my 4-month-old. I called the medical doctor who was a mentor of mine at the university I was attending, BYU in Utah. And the medical doctor actually said to me, what happened? When I called wanting to know what to do with my kid as a new parent and as a college student, undergrad actually, I didn't know a whole lot. I just wanted to know, how do I relieve the seizure symptoms of my kid? And do I call 911, go to your clinic, go to the ER? What do I do? And out of his mouth, this is what he said to me. A guy that had been a mentor for me for like a year, that I thought was going to be a future colleague in the medical field, he actually said to me, Mr. Ardis, that drug would have never done that, even though he'd never had a seizure until I put that drug in his mouth. And 2 minutes later, had a seizure. He's flailing all around, and he's on the phone telling me that that drug would have never caused that effect in my child. It must have been something I did. Did I shake my baby or drop my baby?
Wow.
Over the phone. No interest whatsoever in telling me what to do for my kid, or where to take my kid, or to bring my kid to him so he could assess how he's doing. It was just gaslighting me. I never even heard that term, what gaslighting was, but this was a moment like that. And this is the moment where I decided I couldn't actually be a part of the medical profession. They gaslight you and just drug you to death is what I decided. And don't look for root causes of illnesses. And I wanted to know what was the root cause of my son's suffering, only to discover 2 weeks later he gets adjusted by a chiropractor while I'm at what I think is a physical therapist for a dislocated shoulder while I was playing intramural football. I'm recommended to go to this place in American Fork, Utah, and at this clinic, which I think is a PT place, on the second visit, he asked me to bring my kid from the lobby into the room where I'm being worked on. And it's about 3,000 square feet away, but he can hear that kid screaming at the top of his lungs and asked me in the treatment room, is that your kid? And I said, how would you know that's my kid? And he said, because you were here on Wednesday. And the whole time you were here on Wednesday, and this was a Friday, the very next Friday, he goes, from the time you walked in here on Wednesday until you walked out the door, there was a baby screaming, just like that, the whole time you were here. When you left, it left. You were here again on Friday, and now that you're in here, I hear it again. Is that your kid? Yes, it is. And this physical therapist, which I thought was a physical therapist, asked me to bring the kid back to the room, and I thought it was just to make it more easy and comfortable for the people in the waiting room. Yeah. So I bring him back, and he goes, please put your baby on the table. Now, this is a 4-month-old, and I'm like, I looked at him and I said, what is a physical therapist going to do to my baby? Remember, I'm there for work on my shoulder I dislocated. And he says, I said, what's a physical therapist going to do to a baby? And he goes, I'm not a physical therapist, I'm a chiropractor. And I said, what's a chiropractor? And he goes, just put the kid on the table. Yeah. Your kid sounds like it's in pain. Have you taken this kid to doctors? I said, many medical doctors, yes. What do they say? After $35,000 or so in medical tests in the last 4 months, not a joke, they can only tell us that he's normal and it must just be colic and he'll grow out of it. He threw up everything he ate. He never had a bowel movement without my finger with KY jelly on it stuck up his rear end to push my finger out, and then he would poop. That was every day, and then we couldn't sleep because he screamed all night and day. He never would sleep, and if he did, you had to hold him up against you for 15 minutes, and then when you would fall asleep and your arms would drop, he would wake up and start screaming and be inconsolable. This guy puts his hands on the base of my child's neck, and within 1 second, it feels like, he says, he looks up at me and he goes, I have a question for you. Was this baby born C-section or with forceps? This guy doesn't know me from anybody, and I looked at him and I said, how would you even know that, or even know to ask me that? And he said, because the first vertebrae in his neck below his skull is rotated out of alignment backwards on the right-hand side. And your kid is in extreme pain because of this, and that's why he's inconsolable. It's also why he has all his digestive issues you just mentioned. He said, and the only way you could torque, you guys know fascial work, the only way you could do that is if you used enough torque and pressure to pull using a suction cup, like a extraction with C-section, or to use forceps and pull the baby out of the vaginal canal. And I said, actually, the medical doctor used forceps on him and had cut his ears, and he had black and blue bruises around his ears for the next 3 weeks after birth. That's how hard he used these forceps. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I'm being gaslit by my medical professionals who are seeing my son. And now I'm learning that possibly their actions did this to him. And this is obviously not normal. And he says, will you please just let me adjust your kid? Anyway, he adjusts my kid, and he makes one adjustment with his finger, and it's really light, but it makes this loud popping sound. And I actually thought he broke my kid's neck because I'd never heard a sound like that in a baby. And I picked up my baby, balled up my fist, wanting to punch this guy. And I actually left the clinic and told him I was never coming back because I was pissed. I thought he hurt my kid. I go out of the building. He's yelling at me, following me out, going, please just give him 5 minutes. He'll calm down. I swear he's just in extreme pain since he's born. I wasn't buying it. I thought he hurt my kid. So I get in the car, start driving home, and within 5 minutes, he passes out in the back seat while screaming at the top of his lungs. And I thought he died and had a stroke and pulled over on the side of the car. He's barely breathing. I can feel it through his nose, but he won't wake up no matter how I attempt to wake him. This kid was exhausted, it appeared, but I thought he was dead or in a coma. So we go to the house. I'm doing like 100 miles an hour. I go in and I call the medical doctor, who was actually the one who told me it must have been something I did that caused a seizure, because I didn't know who else to call. I didn't know what to do. I was scared. And he said, what happened? And I told him. And he said, Mr. Ardis, there's nobody that you could have taken your kid to that could have created more harm than a chiropractor. He probably gave your kid a stroke when he adjusted your kid. Mm-hmm. Now, this is the second moment I've been told the actions of my child are my fault. And anyway, I slammed down the phone, and it was about 2 weeks later, while I was studying the MCATs, I decided I couldn't be a part of that profession anymore. I needed people to guide me through how you heal a kid. Anyway, that kid, within 5 minutes of driving home from that clinic and calling that guy while he's passed out, we just decided I'm just going to put him in the crib and see if he's sleeping. I don't know. He never even slept in the crib. Anyway, he slept for 8 hours straight. We went in, set a timer for 10 minutes. Every 10 minutes we went in there for 8 hours, and he was still breathing. 8 hours later, we walk in, and he's just looking at the ceiling. And pick him up. He goes to nurse, falls asleep again, and sleeps for another 5 hours. And after he woke up that second time, never once did he scream. He slept through the night, had bowel movements every day, never threw up another thing. And this, over the next several months of watching what normal looked like, is what made me call the chiropractor and ask him, this is my question. What medical school did you go to learn this chiropractic stuff? And he said, I didn't go to medical school, I went to chiropractic school. And I said, those aren't the same thing? It's not like a specialty in medicine? No. Well, what school did you go to? And he called, he goes, I'll do a favor. I'm gonna call the school I went to and have the president contact you. And sure enough, in like 2 hours, Dr. Fabrizio Mancini at Parker College called me and then sent me a whole bunch of books. And within about 2 months, I was enrolled. And in chiropractic school, I wanted to know everything about chiropractic. Then I actually went to the Texas Dallas College of Oriental Medicine, which is right on campus, started doing acupuncture courses, and I wanted to know everything related to health, to see if I could also reclaim other people's health, including my sister, who had been told, you're gonna have these issues. So that is who I am. That is why I am who I am.
Let's take that apart a little bit, because I practiced chiropractic, but I never went to school. And I practiced internal medicine, never went to school. Neurological medicine, never went to school. I autodidactic, I learn, I replicate, I learn to 80%, and then I apply. And I did it through informed consent in California here, actually just down the road. And what I found is that chiropractors generally become chiropractors because of a personal experience, and I think you know that. The first thing that people will say is, a chiropractor's not a doctor. I mean, you get that a lot. I got that a lot even though I wasn't even a chiropractor. I was just practicing. So, because I really am not a doctor. But what do you say when people say a chiropractor is not a doctor? Because first of all, it's egregious. What do you say when people say that?
Well, anybody who actually says that has no respect for the work you've put in and the education and time you've spent to actually learn a skill set. And so I really try to avoid people who have no respect for the stuff you've done.
But even outside of that, just
I'm just going to tell you
on the educational
how I respond.
path. On the educational path, chiropractors actually learn more.
Yeah, they actually have 4 board exams, and medical doctors only have 3. Mm-hmm. So we have to do 4 national boards, and we have to be certified in all techniques that the state boards in all 50 states allow their chiropractors to do in their states. Even if your state doesn't. I had a practice in Tennessee and in Texas. I had to know everything that Oregon allowed chiropractors to do, which was to deliver babies. I'm not joking, which I didn't know chiropractors were doing that. I thought that was OBGYNs and doulas and midwives. And then also we had to learn how to do minor surgery for Oregon and California, stitches and stuff, and do obstetric gynecological exams. We had to learn that because there's certain states in the country that allow chiropractors to do that, but it wasn't anything I was interested in. But it is a very intense curricula, and you're actually handed a diploma by the end of your chiropractic school that actually reads Doctor of Chiropractic or Doctorate of Chiropractic. So anybody tells you you're not a doctor, I always go like this. So are you telling me every acupuncturist who's a doctor is not a doctor? Every dentist who's a doctor is not a doctor? They're all given a doctorate of dentistry. And then what about PhDs? Do you really dismiss all of their hard work and theses and studies and just dismiss their certificate in
doctor's
education.
teacher.
Literally is Latin
a
for teacher.
And in 1935, they hijacked that status and separated them and said medical doctor and doctor. I grew up in chiropractic care, and I grew up around chiropractors. The first and foremost is that a chiropractor actually has more education than a medical doctor, but generally not taught prescriptive, and that would be it. But they're taught everything else about the body, whereas a medical doctor is taught prescriptive and most often doesn't really know anything in their general education about the body other than how prescriptive affects the body.
Oh, well, I'll tell you, in chiropractic school, I was really excited because they actually, the very first semester, you're required to take medical terminology, which requires you to learn Latin, which is what all of the medical schools teach their doctors to learn before they graduate. So you have to understand Latin in order to be able to speak medical in the conventional mindset. So we had to learn all that too in chiropractic school. And then the first 2 years, I had to take multiple pharmacology courses to understand drugs. So we
did they actually
take
do that down? Because in Canada they don't, I don't think.
Oh, we did it in Dallas, Texas at Parker College.
Wow, okay.
So yes, we learn a lot.
The education of a chiropractor, especially in the United States, specifically Texas, is equal to or greater than any other physician. And I wanted to take that off because we're in the world of natural medicine, but your message is ricocheting through the world of medicine and science at the same time. So taking that off the table, and people can say whatever they want, but chiropractors are primary care physicians, which means they have all the same access as a doctor without the ability to write prescriptions. I think in some places they can prescribe too.
Yes, and there's a lot of states now, state boards in the United States that allow chiropractors to, after I think it's a 1 or 2 year period, get a registered nursing license where they can actually prescribe medications underneath that license.
Yeah,
or certification.
Nurse practitioner, right?
There you go, nurse practitioners, right.
Yeah.
I never was interested in that because everything I learned was you can do with nature what they pretend to do with drugs.
Yeah, so you went from chiropractic, you went into, and this is the important part because it leads to the next part where people get, you actually became a researcher.
Yeah, what I quickly learned was, okay, this is the absolute truth, okay? Okay. What I learned with having my very first son while he's being born and being cleaned up by nurses is that medical doctors and nurses just make up shit. And they will just lie to your face and make up stuff. And what I started to realize is they actually will make up stuff because they actually don't know as much as we think they know. So they will just make up stuff or then just dismiss it. When people use the phrase, you're not a real doctor, it's really using the same terminology as attempted to use in media by going, that's a conspiracy theory. Like it's a way to immediately dismiss credibility of whatever's being said, spoken, or represented by that individual. And I just find that to be very disrespectful to the individuals who actually have the license, the time, the knowledge, the clinical experience, the research that they've actually spent time, and are educating people in their audiences, which is exactly what a doctor is. So I really don't put up with the BS of the medical profession. It's become very obvious since the COVID-19 pandemic. I have been lied to my entire life by the medical profession.
Yeah, and it's also on the other side too. There's a lot of really great doctors.
There are.
I have a lot of doctors I would call colleagues because I worked with them for years. Like 1,500 of some of the best doctors in the world were patients or clients of mine, however you want to define it. And there are some really good ones that have gone outside and studied. But you went from doctor and then the research part of it. This is really interesting because a lot of the foundation of what you talk about is based heavily on research, where anybody who reads your book and goes to your website knows that this is not your opinion, this is actually research.
You will never actually hear me speak on a topic that I haven't actually researched to the nth degree to be able to make sense to it to me personally. Many things are written in a scientific way, and you'll read words you just don't understand, and I have to know them all. Like I have to break them all down, make sure I can make sense to me what's being published before I ever present it or attempt to use that information in a clinical setting with a patient. But I'll give you an example. So I had a billionaire patient who came into my office, in my Dallas, Texas office. This is an example of the research. This is what I love. This guy comes in, he's been to the Mayo Clinic 5 times in 2 years for 3-month stints at a time for a condition called aphasia, which is what Bruce Willis just retired from Hollywood
Right.
Yeah.
being diagnosed with, which is your brain is thinking what to say, but your mouth won't say it. It is delayed. So you'll see you have the thought you want to say something, but then there's like 30-second delay, a minute delay, sometimes 2-minute delay, where you're just sitting there and you're waiting for the part of your brain to tell your mouth to say it. And it's very embarrassing, very humiliating to the individuals who have this. And this guy built a massive company from scratch, multi-billion-dollar company. He comes into my practice having been diagnosed with aphasia, but had spent 2 years at the Mayo Clinic in Wisconsin, believing he's with the best of the best, which he was in that field. But he ends up in my office because 2 years later, he's still got the same problem. It's only getting worse. So this is what it looked like. He actually came in, and I felt bad for him because you could tell he was embarrassed. He's in his 60s. I went to the kids' room and I grabbed a Magnadoodle and said, "Can you write the answers faster than you could speak them?" And he said yes. So he just used a Magnadoodle to answer my question, and it was faster than the delayed speech would come. The next day, him and his wife brought an iPad so that he could write on, which was better than a Magnadoodle. Between the time he came into my office and the very next day when I decided to give him his report of findings and he was able to come in, I already figured out that night in 30 minutes what was causing his aphasia that no one at the Mayo Clinic had even looked at. On the intake forms, he actually had 5 different prescription medications. 3 of them were cholesterol drugs, 2 of them were high blood pressure drugs. But I didn't know how long he'd been on them. I just saw them on there and by name. So I went home and I wanted to know, of these pharmaceutical drugs, I wonder if any of these are published in peer-reviewed published research studies to be known to cause aphasia. So all I did was type in the name of the drug in PubMed.gov, type the name of the drug and these words, and aphasia. And couldn't believe it. Did you know every cholesterol drug, every statin drug is published to cause aphasia?
Aphasia, yes.
And the age group that it is most often diagnosed in is his age range.
Yeah.
60 to 70, males. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like 90% of all people diagnosed with aphasia from cholesterol are in that age range. So it was very easy. The next morning, they come in. I don't have any recommendations for them, supplement-wise, chiropractic-wise. I don't have to do anything. You're just going to come in and I'm going to tell you what the plan is. The plan is you're going to stop your cholesterol drugs today, is what I told him. His wife is sitting next to him. His wife's like, "No, you are not stopping those drugs." And I said, "Oh, did you make his appointment or did he make his appointment?" He did. I said, "Good, so he wants help." Okay, I need you to understand something. I printed out these research studies, and as they're flipping through it, they had no idea that the cholesterol drugs had a published side effect to cause aphasia. I looked at him and I said, "Did anybody at the Mayo Clinic in your 5 trips look at these drugs that you were diagnosed on, or did the Mayo Clinic put you on these?" And he said, "No, before each of those visits, I was on all 5 of these." And I said, "Can I ask you when you were prescribed these drugs?" And he said, 3 years ago. I said, "How long ago did your aphasia start?" And he goes, 2.5 years ago. And I said, "Okay, you're going to stop your cholesterol drugs today, and then your speech is going to come back." The wife was worried he might stroke out from coming off his cholesterol drugs. She's worried about blood clotting and whatever else, or risk of heart attacks and strokes. My very next question, as she's bantering, I looked at him and I said, "I just showed you the research. I've given you a reason for your aphasia that actually lines up with the chronological timing of you developing aphasia. You were given drugs. 6 months later, you start developing the inability to speak." And I said, "Why did they put you on these drugs? Did you have high cholesterol?" Not a joke. He says, "My doctor said it was for prevention." And I said, "Hold up. You didn't even have high cholesterol? They put you on this for prevention? And you're losing your mind, you feel like? And your inability to speak and govern your board?" He couldn't even go to a board meeting for 2 years because he was too embarrassed to not be able to speak confidently in front of his executives. 2 weeks later, I get a text message from his daughter that she's finally got her dad back as he came off the drugs. Within 2 weeks, all of his speech was returned. So this is the power of doing research, is just asking questions why. There is always a root cause. And unfortunately, in the world of medicine, the horrible doctors that are medical doctors that are horrible are those who believe the phrase that the pharmaceutical industry and the medical industrial complex has made sure is continuously published in the mainstream media and in medical journals. Correlation does not equal causation. And y'all really need to break that phrase down, because that is the excuse they give when they say our drug didn't cause X, our procedure didn't cause X. Just because the timing is identical,
Well, too bad that
doesn't equal correlation.
too bad when you were
Correlation does not
talking
equal causation.
Too bad when you're talking to your doctor or mentor, he didn't take that at heart.
Exactly right.
Because
2 minutes.
Correlation for your son, he's saying correlation is causation. Does not equal
Correlation does not equall causation. One of the greatest fraudulent lies in medicine.
It's very clear that you've thought this out, that you've been through this. The one thing I've never bought into the virus story, but I talked in virology because that's the language people needed to hear. The thing that baffles me is how do you convince hundreds of millions of physicians that viruses exist? That's the crazy part. And I mean, I have a belief in how it happened, but that's a massive hoodwink.
Well, I easily explain all of this with the father of propaganda. Do you know who he is?
Oppenheimer?
Joseph Goebbels.
Oh, Goebbels.
So Joseph Goebbels, who was the father of propaganda for the Nazi Third Reich for Hitler, Joseph Goebbels is historically known for this statement: tell a big lie and tell it often enough, and people will eventually believe it.
So when people say that viruses don't exist, you gave me context to something that I believe, but I just didn't have the time to figure it out. It wasn't that relevant to me. I would just work on health. But the whole idea of what a virus is.
Is that you asking me what the virus is?
Well,
Or what it's
I
not.
know
Or if it exists?
What if it
I know what it means in Latin.
Okay. Do you?
Yeah.
What does it mean in Latin?
Yeah.
Poison, comma, by that of a venomous steak.
Right. So, okay. So I love that you know that. Or did I tell you that?
Listen, I grew up in a world where...
This is so exciting.
Yeah, I grew up in a world where I didn't believe in it, but I had to talk about it because that's what everybody talked about. But I didn't have language to express the way I felt about it, which you gave me language.
I love it. And I always have to break things down in a way that language-wise allows us to be able to coherently understand, resonate together, understand together, grow together. I like breaking things down this way. All right, so for the whole terrain versus germ theory conversation, right? This is really what we're getting at. Do viruses really exist? Okay. The word virus is a Latin word. All of medicine is built on the Latin language. So the word virus being used by the medical and pharmaceutical professions is intentional. They know what the word virus means. So in my home, we should do an interview somewhere else and let me bring these with me. I currently own 30 Latin to English dictionaries that date back to 1770, which are defined Latin words from before any of us were ever born. And anyone talking in the media about viruses existing or not, these books were around and printed before they were born. So are viruses real? Are they real? Do they exist? Okay. Go back to 1770, go to 1790, go to 1810, go to 1830. I own all of these Latin to English dictionaries. So the first half is Latin to English definitions.
Yeah.
And then the second half is English words in the Latin definition. Okay? In 100% of them, up until now, look up the word virus in the Latin to English dictionary and it reads the same thing in all of them for 300 years. The word virus in Latin means poison, especially of snake's venom. So I'd like to ask you, are poisons real? Do poisons exist?
They do.
They do.
And they have a specific signature
They obviously exist.
measured by spike proteins.
Right, so poisons, we are all aware that poisons do exist and there's various forms of poisons. So if every Latin to English dictionary for the last 300 years reads that a virus in Latin means poison, especially of snake's venom, when you go to the English to Latin sections of every one of these dictionaries, what I find even more ironic is that if you just look up the English word venom in English to Latin dictionaries, 100% of them only have one word as the Latin definition. Only one word. Venom. Venom. Venom in English means in Latin the word virus. Are venoms real?
Yes, venoms are real.
Okay, good. So viruses exist.
So I'll throw this out to you because you know more than me in this. So mass deception is really powerful. And I've done tens and tens of thousands of lab tests at scale. And what the question was when we do these subclinical lab tests is how do you know that number is real? Like when somebody really gets down to it, because they can be arbitrary, different types. I grew up studying Dr. Garry Lineham, the terrain theory. And also he was put in jail in California and died in jail for practicing medicine by helping somebody in Arizona. One of the ways that I would say, and I'm just going to hypothesize here, if I wanted everybody to believe, I would say, well, when you go get this test, you're going to look for these spike proteins. And these proteins, this one means AIDS, this one means X and X and X all the way through. And I, as a physician, I have learned to look at the test, not the actual body. It's like an X-ray never, ever really defines the pain that people have, or very rarely, like 75% of the time. In my practice, it never defined it, or an MRI, because I'm dealing with physical body pain usually. So all you would have to do is say, this virus equals this protein. When you see this, that's what it is. And since nobody else does anything but run a test, that's their only conclusion. Is that how it happened?
I guess so. I can't speak for them, but I guess so.
Because these are one of these things where I look at and say, how did you fool hundreds of millions of people into thinking something?
Yeah, if you actually dive into the research, a lot of people blame the medical industrial complex's control over all narrative of health back to one document called the Flexner Report, which was written by a guy named Abraham Flexner in 1910. You can still buy it and download and read it right now. But the Flexner Report rewrote all the curriculum for the medical schools in Canada and America, which now everyone else around the world looks at as an example of truth. And if you want to really get to the viral deceit, I believe it all started in the 1880s. And I believe it started with Louis Pasteur's Institute when they sent Albert Calmette to Saigon to create the first two ever vaccines. And while he was producing the first ever rabies and smallpox vaccines, do you know what he was actually sent to also make at the exact same time in the exact same lab? He was sent 10 king cobras from India to study the venom of king cobras and develop, for the first time ever, anti-venom to snake bites. And he created anti-venom and the smallpox vaccine and the rabies vaccine all at the same time in the same lab. Albert Calmette.
It just gets deeper and deeper and deeper.
Okay, Albert Calmette is quoted by Abraham Flexner's brother, who wrote the Flexner Report in 1910 for Carnegie Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation.
Rockefeller, right, yeah.
So they paid Abraham Flexner to do this. Who they were using for the medical curriculum research and write-ups for all the schools was a brother of Abraham Flexner named Simon Flexner, who they enrolled and gave money to be able to go to Johns Hopkins University. Okay? In 1905, 5 years before the Flexner Report, Simon Flexner is being paid to investigate and do research on one thing and one thing only: the blood clotting effects of snake venom. And he quotes throughout there Albert Calmette's work in the 1880s. And I believe the whole viral lie and deceit was created at the hands of the Louis Pasteur Institute, Rockefeller, Carnegie, and all of them, by paying Abraham Flexner to create the report and rewrite all the curriculum for all medical schools and rewrite your knowledge of infectious diseases and terrain and environment, internal and external, using venoms, I believe, and proteins isolated from snake venom, paying Simon Flexner and Albert Calmette to create these syringe-injected antidotes that they call anti-venom. Now, if viruses are actually venom, guess what every vaccine is actually intended to be? An anti-venom.
Anti-venom, yeah. We're going to get into some questions about the remedies. People can go deep into your book. They can go into your research. This is also public data. This isn't just your data. This is published by CDC, NIH, and we can point people to those. And actually, we are going to start pointing people, because we get lots of questions now. We're going to start pointing people to that and giving them a place to go satiate themselves. Because at some point, people need to, it's easier to fool people than it is to convince them they've been fooled. So it's an unlayering approach. I talked to Dr. Tom Cowan last year, and again, it was confirming something I believed, but I didn't have words for it. Now there's words for it. So we want people, and they can watch the previous podcast that we did and get right down to the specifics. I think right now we have questions because we've been applying the recommendations, and there are some questions that we have from the recommendations because they're working. And we have a scale around the world which we can see where even a medical practitioner may have hundreds of patients. We have millions of people and hundreds of thousands that report to us anecdotally, but nevertheless, at that scale, you can't dismiss anecdotal evidence. So you've recommended the one important thing, and I want to dig down into why nicotine and why it works, and then we'll get into some of the questions we have around it.
Yeah, this is great. The entire purpose of the book that we wrote, and I appreciate everybody who's putting together platforms and sharing truths that others who are researching or applying information, getting that hope to other people around the world. Can't thank you enough for what Human Garage has done. The entire book was only written to provide hope to people around the world because there's currently 300 million people around the world who have been diagnosed with long COVID, and they come up to me everywhere around the world, everywhere, every weekend, everywhere I speak, medical conventions, wherever it is I am. They will all come up to me and thank me for the hope that was provided either from my presentations or in the book. And they're varied based on the symptoms that they have. What most people are unaware of is the majority of all symptoms caused or called COVID-19. If you had COVID-19 symptoms anytime after 2020, even though we know they were experimenting with these poisons before that, but what they called COVID led to symptoms such as hypoxia, low oxygen levels, put a pulse ox on your finger and watch the numbers drop from 100 down. So that was low oxygen levels, loss of taste and smell, ringing in the ears, brain fog, insomnia, exercise-induced asthma still going on. These are all called long COVID symptoms. What you don't know is the word virus, like we've just defined, means poison. Mm-hmm. What they found was it wasn't just one poison that made up all symptoms of COVID. Every singular symptom isolated that they called COVID or COVID-19 related or long COVID or vaccine injured are actually blamed on 36 specific poisons. And DNA tests in 5 different countries confirmed what those poisons were. And once DNA analysis allowed them to identify what is the molecular makeup of the poisons that were in each body, they discovered that the reason why smokers, it was being reported around the world, were completely immune to COVID,
Least
it appeared.
affected. Yeah.
They actually published it. You can see all the articles. I actually have mainstream article publications in the book too, highlighting this starting in April and May of 2020. That it appeared from all around the world that smokers were immune. And smokers, they actually expected in January of 2020, even our government in America was actually publishing, empty all hospitals, cancel all outpatient procedures, leave all beds available because they're all hospitals are going to be flooded with smokers. This is what they said.
Yeah, I remember
Because all the smokers who have lungs that are damaged by tobacco use commercially are going to inhale a virus that are going to make those weakened and diseased lungs even more horrific of an outcome. And they're all going to be in the hospitals. Only 5 months later into the pandemic, almost every hospital was empty. And there were no smokers in any of them. In fact, to this day, smokers are still the least affected by COVID to get sick, be hospitalized, or die. It's only 1.6% of all smokers.
My father, he just turned 81 a little while ago, but that whole time period during COVID, the height of it, people telling him to mask up. He never wore a mask or anything, but he's a pipe smoker and is Venezuelan. Never got sick the whole time. And he eats peanut butter sandwiches for breakfast, and like eats cocoa wheats. But like the nicotine makes sense of like how it connects, but he never encountered anything.
So I would like
to. He's always smoked pipe.
Yeah, that's awesome. I actually have tons of medical doctors who immediately when I released a documentary called Watch the Water 3 years ago in 2022 with Stu Peters, when we released that, it had tens of millions of views overnight. Many MDs immediately contacted me and said, oh my God, finally, my parents' scenarios of health during COVID finally make sense. And all of them said to me independently, They have one parent that's a chain smoker, and the other one is like a eat right, intense organic, all working out, staying healthy guy, all natural. And the one chronic smoker was the only one that never got COVID, but the other one has had debilitating effects of COVID and was sick. The healthiest ones were appearing to be the healthiest ones, were the ones that were actually being the most affected. So what was so exciting to learn was, and then demoralizing at the same time, was in April of 2020, researchers in France, and I show you the research study, it's peer-reviewed by all the medical peers and researchers, and then published, still online. They actually, I find this interesting, by the way. In the paper, they say they requested the spike proteins of COVID, and they were shipped to them in April of 2020 from China and the UK. That's in their paper. Is that not weird to you?
It's extremely weird, yeah.
I mean, it's extreme.
Okay. So they received the spike proteins of COVID from China and the United Kingdom, and then they put it into a DNA analysis machine. And then the DNA is published. And they published what the spike proteins are most identical to. And they say it's most identical to three things. Cobra toxin, which is a protein from the venom of the king cobra that is a neurotoxin. It damages nerves and affects nerves. And the second most likely thing it's identical to is what's called bungarotoxin, which is a snake in Asia called the crate snake's venom. And it's of the bungarus genre, which is their Latin scientific name, but it's called a crate snake. So bungarotoxin and then cobra toxin are the two things that the spike proteins of COVID are identical to. And they said there's also 3 segments of what's called the rabies virus that they said was also very similar to these spike proteins. Now, I have something to say about that in a second, so ask me about rabies, okay?
Yeah.
First two I want to focus on, because they keep talking about in this research paper, is cobra toxin and bungarotoxin. These are 2 neurotoxic venoms that affect the nervous system of a mammal, human being also. And what it does is, they said, now that we know exactly what the spike proteins are identical to, which the spike proteins, if anybody around the world saw the images of COVID, it was a ball, the virus, but there's going to be spikes all over it, like a spike ball, like the little game. That's what the images they wanted you to see. All the individual spikes on the outside, those little bitty things extending around the ball, is what they were saying was making all the symptoms of COVID and making it so deadly, because there was no other virus with these little spikes on it, specifically. So these spikes were identical to 2 snakes' venom proteins, and they said now that we know this, science already knows what these 2 neurotoxic venoms target. And this is shocking, if you don't mind me spending a moment on this, because I couldn't believe it 3 years ago when I read this paper for the first time. They published in the paper that every medical doctor around the world is talking about, that in the lungs, when we breathe in air, if we breathe in the COVID-19 virus, the virus gets inside the lung cells to cause respiratory arrest symptoms or pneumonia or COVID pneumonia by entering through what's called the ACE2 receptors, which is on the outside of the lung cells. And they'd say the spike proteins were like a key that entered a lock called the ACE2 receptor, and then it would unlock the cell and then move in and infect it and make the lung sick. Mm-hmm. The French scientist, to my shock 3 years ago, 2 years into COVID-19, actually published, it's already been studied that human beings, and published, don't have ACE2 receptors on the surface of their lung cells. So this can't be how people are getting COVID.
Right. Oh my God.
To this day, it is still being published in medical journals that the ACE2 receptors in the lungs is how COVID-19 is getting into your body.
But humans don't have
There
ACE2.
is no ACE2 receptors on the outside of the lungs inside your human body to be exposed to the air molecules or viruses with the spike proteins. So I'm really sorry, you've all been lied to.
Yeah, wow.
So the French researcher said, though, these definitely don't bind to ACE2 receptors in the lungs, but what these neurotoxins do is in the venom of these creatures, it gets inside the bloodstream and immediately crosses the blood-brain barrier. And then it targets specific receptors in the brainstem of a mammal to suppress its ability to breathe. And these cells that control the heart's beat and contraction and the diaphragm's contraction in a mammal to draw in air, these receptors are called alpha-7 nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, or nicotine receptors for short. And they said Because we know these venom proteins from these two snakes target alpha-7 nicotine receptors, this finally explains why smokers around the world seem immune to COVID. Because nicotine in the plants of the earth are perfectly designed to fit inside these receptors. And then venom proteins can't bind there. So the body just eliminates you, poop them out and pee them out, the spike proteins. And this is how smokers were protected. In the same paper, they said, now knowing through DNA analysis what the spike proteins of COVID are most identical to, it also explains why scientists and medical professionals around the world are saying ivermectin is working against COVID. And this is awesome. They actually write, ivermectin, like nicotine, acts on alpha-7 nicotine receptors in the body, but in a different role. It's called a positive allosteric modulator, or for medical scientists and researchers, those are called PAMs, P-A-M, positive allosteric modulator. And the ivermectin molecule will sit on those receptors, but not as perfectly bound to them as nicotine, which is why when people around the world are using nicotine patches, nicotine gum, tobacco organic products, even if they've been using ivermectin for 2 years now trying to resolve their long COVID symptoms, within 24 hours to 48 hours, they will usually see all of their COVID symptoms disappear when adding nicotine. Because ivermectin isn't the perfect fit. Even though it is a fit, it is not as perfect as nicotine.
So is it coming in and removing the venom from the receptors and replacing it?
It does.
So it's competing for that space.
It absolutely does.
But
and
like,
they publish that it will actually, the body will release venoms if they're bound to those receptors and grab and prefers nicotine.
Yeah. My question is, how are people actually catching it? Because how are you getting that venom inside your body in the first place? Because we were working on people who had COVID. We were working on them. We didn't have masks on. We were in the same room. We're doing body work on them. We walk away totally fine. So I just didn't understand that. Like, how are they transferring that venom to somebody else?
Yeah, I'm actually 100% convinced that in order to spread a poison or a virus, the way that it happened around the world, and at the same time, governments around the world in unison and lockstep locked everybody down in their homes. Remember this? Remember the most horrific supposed variant of COVID? Do you remember which one variant created the worst symptoms, supposedly, for the majority of people? It was called Delta. And it was just one summer in 2021. So Delta was actually spreading around the United States, where I live, and all around the world. During a period, we were all locked down in our homes and not allowed to travel and be at work and be on planes. So I would like to ask you, how did we share it with our neighbors, and how did it spread throughout the world? If we're all in our homes and we all have air conditioning ventilation systems with filters, how did they spread this pathogen through the air, or this poison through the air? I actually surmised that the governments were all in lockstep in creating this pandemic I call a plandemic, which I'm not the only one who's used that reference. It had to be a well-orchestrated, planned agenda. And the only thing all Americans who live in urban areas pay the government of the United States or their cities or the municipalities to deliver into their home that is vital for their survival every single day is what? Water. And what have they been doing to our water since the 50s?
Yes. I mean, this is a big proponent. Like we have shower filters and double up sometimes. We use water filters. We ship them to all of our locations. And there is another aspect of it too, which I felt the wrath of the institutions in 2019, the banks. 2018, the banks started shutting me down. The board started coming into the clinic to shut me down. And it was because I was also referencing the air. But the delivery mechanism, I have a video where Bill Gates was specifically talking about delivering a load, a viral load, via air, and it was HMRT, MAT-T variant or whatever it was, to sedate radicalism in humans. And I don't know if you've ever seen that video.
Mm-mm.
I'll show it to you.
I would love to see.
Yeah, it was recorded as a government briefing. And I looked at it and said, well, there's interesting things. In the clinic, I was pulling out, and I had all these people sick, and we'd run all the tests, and nothing was working. So I'm just going to keep running tests till I find something. Hair follicle testing showed extremely high barium, strontium, aluminum in the fascial tissue, the hair follicle. So it's not in the blood, not measured in the blood, but it's measured in the tissue. And then just went down that rabbit hole, realizing that barium was depleting silica. Without silica, we couldn't absorb, calphos, selenium, all that. Without that, we don't absorb minerals. And I don't know if you had a chance to touch us, but we're 80% water. Today, people are 60% water. So it's death by 1,000 cuts. It's water, it's air, it's neurotoxins that are delivered in our clothing. I know you believe and you promote all of these things, but it is definitely death by 1,000 cuts. Because I believe in the human body's ability to heal and perform if it's in the right fishbowl. But you put dirty water in a fishbowl, and the fish get sick no matter what you feed the fish. And our fishbowl has been polluted significantly.
Well, I even remember when, during COVID, I went to my friend's house, and the water coming out of the tap had a completely different smell to it. Yeah. But I'm still like...
Have you seen the videos of people sticking the PCR test under their tap water and turning it on and it going positive?
Yeah.
And to Coca-Cola, tons of stuff. But it's like some people got it and some people didn't, even though we're drinking the tap water. I mean, there must be something in some people who aren't even smoking, because we weren't taking nicotine at the time.
There is nicotine. That goes back to...
But we weren't taking nicotine at the time.
But what we were doing is eating eggplants, tomatoes, potatoes.
Yeah.
Very good. He listened.
And
He finally
so can you give me that ratio, like the amount of nicotine in a package of cigarettes compared to food?
Yeah. So Medical News Today actually has it in their articles that a cigarette, has on average 1 milligram to 1.5 milligrams of nicotine. Mm-hmm. And the eggplant is 100 micrograms. Not even a milligram. So it's a tenth of the amount you'd find in one cigarette. You'd have to eat a whole lot of eggplants.
Yeah.
But if you are consistently eating those nightshade vegetables that contain the second highest amount of nicotine of any plants on earth, your body would have the amount of nicotine it needs.
And filtering the water and filtering the air.
Yep.
Because it has to come in a multiple. What I was looking at clinically is that I had people at the Human Garage Clinic that came from all over the world, because we had 52 practitioners from every discipline. We had the most elite celebrities and people, athletes. They're coming in from all over the world, but they had similar symptoms. And I'm like, this can't be, because normally you'd go to, where do they eat? What's the, where do they live? And they all lived in different places, including in the country, well water, all kinds of things. And they all had similar symptoms. So it had to be delivered by multiple mediums.
I'm super curious about that too. I wonder if there's even predispositions in people's body that contain certain things, because I didn't have any special air filters. I still drank clean water. I didn't get sick at all during COVID. I think at one point I had a mild fever. That's it. But I was just eating primarily meat, not even vegetables really. And did all my stuff, didn't wear masks, was always active and was never bothered by it. And even my family, my parents and stuff like that. My mom did get of course had to take a test because she flew somewhere, and then came back with it, but didn't pass it on to anybody within my dad or anybody. So I'm just curious if there must be some because I know a lot of people like that who weren't doing anything extra special,
but lifestyle,
or taking nicotine.
Lifestyle,
but
you're in
attitude,
the sun,
energy.
You're in the sun. You're exercising. You're eating healthy. At the end of it, I've always believed in the body's ability. The body is indestructible if it has the right conditions. Oh. And we're still using words around this table here, pass it on. Louis,
I don't believe in the pass on thing.
Yeah, so it's not. There is no pass it on. It's been passed to us, but I'm not passing from me to you.
Yeah.
I find it funny because, I'll be with somebody, and we're sharing a drink, and they're sick. Their whole family's sick.
Yeah, I don't get sick. Yeah.
I don't get sick. Nobody around me gets sick. So it's I think just changing the narrative around what sick is. It's really just your body's healing from something. It's cleaning something out.
And that's what we've been telling people, is that what we say sick is technically, biologically, is your body's actually cleaning. So that actually is the healing mechanism, which means that something else was sick. We mean my life was sick. The body we call sick, healing. And that's another big lie that's been perpetrated on people.
So you're probably more familiar with it because of research and stuff like that. So prior to 1910, 1920, people still use like natural remedies, primarily herbs and things like that. They were out being in nature, all that, and then the narrative started to shift. In that kind of research, have you found that like that whole pass on, if you're next to someone, you're going to catch something, was that like weaved into part of the Louis Pasteur, Rockefeller narratives, or like how
Louis
was that?
Pasteur on his deathbed said something that was really important.
Yes, he did.
He said, I do not believe what I'm known for. We don't pass on things. And
He was recanting the germ theory.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that I find just completely crazy is that, we agree that what happens at the cellular level happens at the universal level. But somewhere in between, there's a human being, and that human being somehow acts differently than the cell and the universe. And biologically, the cells communicate with every other cell, and that's part of how they keep healthy. And when a cell stops communicating and isolates itself, it's actually cancerous. And that is, when we've taught each other to not share. But I mean, we share the glasses, we share plates. And furthermore, when I grew up, that's just the way it was. When you grew up, it was the way it is.
But we had mono come in, then we had AIDS, then we had now COVID. So it was like everybody became more and more afraid of connecting and touching certain things. Like, do you know much about mono and AIDS and how all that came in?
Yeah, let's go to that. Right when you said AIDS, my very next thought was, no one reminded me to go back to the rabies.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, rabies.
The French researchers identified that cobra toxin and bungaroo toxin are the spike proteins of COVID, which are two venom proteins that are neurotoxins from two snakes. And they said there's a third thing it's most identical to, and that's 3 small pieces of 3 different variants of the rabies virus. Everybody at home have fun with this one. Go to pubmed.gov, because I love research. Don't take my word for it. Go to pubmed.gov and type in rabies and homologous, HOMOLOGOUS, to snake venom, and you will see that the rabies virus has a spike protein called RGP, rabies glycoprotein, that every scientist for 50 years has published is homologous to snake venom proteins. Now listen to me. You have all heard in this interview that the word virus in Latin means poison, especially of snake's venom. Now you're learning that the rabies virus, it has 1 spike protein, and it is published by scientists to be homologous, which literally means one of its definitions is identical to, the rabies spike protein is identical to snake venom neurotoxins. That's what they publish. Did you know if you look up the HIV virus, it has its own spike protein that supposedly is responsible for creating the AIDS scenario, and that the HIV virus's spike protein is called GP120, and GP stands for glycoprotein. Glyco is Latin for sugar, protein. Glycoprotein 120. Do your own research. Type in pubmed.gov, HIV's GP120 and homologous snake venom protein, and you will read over and over it is published that the spike protein of HIV is identical to snake venom proteins. Now, that's HIV and rabies. Remember, what's the word virus mean in Latin?
Poison.
Poison, especially of snake's venom. What does venom in English mean in Latin? Virus. Okay, great. So now I've just given you COVID-19's virus has spike proteins that are identical to snake venom. Then they said there's a part of the rabies virus that even is showing up as the spike protein of COVID, and that spike protein of rabies is also published to be homologous to snake venom proteins, or identical or similar to, and now HIV does. Do you know what's amazing to me? What Dr. Anthony Fauci's gotten away in the last 40 years? He actually replicated the HIV pandemic, or whatever you want to call it, the hysteria of HIV in the 80s and AIDS, and a drug called AZT was all introduced and overseen by Dr. Anthony Fauci. Mm-hmm. I just told you, HIV, published. Go look it up. HIV's GP120 is homologous to snake venom proteins. Do you know what AZT is, which is the drug Anthony Fauci introduced to the world as the save-all for those who had HIV and now diagnosed with AIDS? Do you know what AZT is made from? They found a marine sponge in the ocean in the 80s, in the Caribbean Ocean. and they extracted the venom of this very deadly marine sponge, and they synthetically manufactured it and replicated it and put it into a drug they called AZT. So now they have HIV, a virus with a spike protein that's homologous to snake venom, and they're treating you with a drug called AZT that's actually marine sponge venom. And guess what the marine sponge's venom's signs and symptoms of toxicity are identical to? Every sign and symptom of AIDS, including their eventual death.
Okay, so we I mean, deeper and deeper and deeper. Let's. I wanted to ask a couple things, because I grew up in an area where we were talking about this earlier, where around AIDS, like I was convinced I had AIDS because I had sex, and it was real. I mean, it was, my friends were convinced and all this, and the virologist from France, Luc Montagnier, thank you for saying it because I always mispronounce it. He was injecting himself with the blood of supposed AIDS patients to prove, on public demonstration, to prove that AIDS was not a transmittable disease. And is he still, he just recently died.
He just recently passed a couple years ago.
Passed, yeah. So we have this mass hysteria, this mass fear about reducing contact. And when we reduce contact, we reduce our ability to defend against the environment, because each of us has a unique situation. We go out, we develop an immunity to it, and then when we commune, we share that immunity, and that's how immunity works. There are diseases like that, viruses, or we say viruses, or viral diseases, or viral loads, like Epstein-Barr. Let's take down a couple of them.
So Epstein-Barr is a virus. Just remember the word virus.
Poison, yeah.
A virus means poison. So you have been poisoned. So I'm really sorry, but you've all been poisoned, those with Epstein-Barr virus, and then you're told, many of you, that you are now disabled for life with a condition called chronic fatigue syndrome as a result of Epstein-Barr virus.
And then we move from the viral loads into the diagnosable disease pathologies, which are now being related to COVID, like Parkinson's, MS, dementia.
Yeah, let's do that. All right, so there's a specific chapter in my book. And the reason why I wrote this entire book is because 300 million people around the world right now are supposedly diagnosed with long COVID symptoms. And it is published as of 2024, when it was written, that the people who have these scenarios or symptoms of long COVID, and I'm going to name off a whole bunch of them here in a second, what now encompasses the long COVID diagnosis. But they are publishing now that from 2024, when it was published, that for the next 10 years, these people could suffer with all these symptoms. Well, what are some of these 200, it is actually 200 symptoms and medical diagnoses that are now termed long COVID, and are now billable to your health insurance to cover prescriptions and procedures for medical therapies? Not a joke.
Let's go through some of them.
Here, so loss of taste and smell is one of these you're going to suffer with for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's not going to go away for 10 years.
Actually, that would have been really good with my mother's cooking, but okay, go ahead, sorry.
I now know why she wasn't cooking today. That's right. No, I'm just kidding. I'm glad she wasn't here cooking the food I just ate.
Oh, she's probably here, all right.
I'm just kidding. All right, so you've got loss of taste and smell. It's going to last for 10 years at a bare minimum. Then they publish that people are going to have tinnitus or tinnitus ringing in their ears for the next 10 years, or maybe forever. Brain fog is another long COVID diagnosable condition. Did you know diabetes type 1 and type 2 are now long COVID diagnosable disease? That means you didn't have diabetes before you got COVID, during COVID. Not vaccinated. I'm not talking about anybody vaccinated. I'm talking about people who got symptoms of COVID, or maybe didn't even know they had symptoms of COVID from 2020 to 2023. And then weeks later, you start developing worsening symptoms that just keep getting worse. And just, we cannot jump off of this. Ask me why they get worse.
Why they get worse?
No, not right now.
Okay.
You just remember, ask me, why did they get worse, and why does anybody get worse? I want to run through this group of symptoms because all of you know somebody who has these symptoms, and they have no idea, and nor do most of their medical professionals know what the antidotes are to help reclaim your health. because they don't have the knowledge that is published by researchers around the world who have already figured out what caused all these long COVID symptoms. But you'll have loss of taste and smell, insomnia. If you walk upstairs since 2020 and you have to stand at the top of the stairs to catch your breath, that's a long COVID diagnosable condition now. Exercise-induced asthma, I mentioned insomnia, depression, and now let's get into the mental health illnesses. Did you know now the psychiatry industry
DSM.
has a volume of a book called DSM-5 or 6, whatever it is now, I think it's DSM-5. In that document now are a laid out list of psychiatric and mental health conditions that are now called long COVID. And schizophrenia is in it. Did you know schizophrenia is now a long COVID diagnosable condition that you can be institutionalized for or put on drugs for the rest of your life? Just so you know, there's a reason why you have those mental illnesses and those symptoms, and I show you all of the poisons that cause them in the book and what the published antidotes are. I even tell you what medical tests to order if you want to do that to confirm the presence of those poisons, and still the antidotes will apply. And I'll show you all the research studies confirming it.
Let's go to neuromuscular and brain.
Yeah, and then you've got Guillain-Barré syndrome is now a published long-term, long COVID side effect or symptom. Guillain-Barré syndrome, Bell's palsy. We talked about diabetes, which is endocrine. Then you're going to get to myocarditis is a big one.
That's my funny Latin, myo.
Oh, interesting. Do you know where the word, okay, this is awesome. Let's have some fun here. How many of you know when the word myocarditis was ever first written to describe a symptom?
1862.
1886.
Close.
Or in the 1880s.
Yeah,
it's in
it's
that
close.
decade, 1880s. Do you know who wrote that descriptive term to describe a symptom?
No, I don't.
Albert Calmet.
Oh, right. Bizarre.
Do you know that Albert Calmet published when he created antivenom from king cobra venom in the 1880s, paid for by the Louis Pasteur Institute to go to Saigon to make this? Do you know that when he first started giving human beings antivenom to king cobra venom, they would develop a heart condition that he described as myocarditis?
Yeah.
Okay, this is important. What was the COVID-19 vaccine supposedly getting your body to manufacture?
Spike proteins.
Spike proteins. What were spike proteins identified to be?
Venom.
Venom. What is in antivenom? What's in antivenom? And how do they make antivenom?
Well,
They inject venom of a snake
venom
into a cow or a horse, and wait a few weeks for the horse or the cow, which is a big animal that won't die from that little bit of snake venom. Their body will produce antibodies against the venom.
Oh.
And then they take that blood from the animal, knowing it has antibodies and venom, and they will inject it inside of a man or a woman who's been bitten by that same snake. And there is venom in there, and your reaction is myocarditis in many people that are treated with antivenom for snake bites. And it was first ever written and described by Albert Calmet in the 1880s. Isn't that amazing?
out of curiosity.
And you never heard of it until COVID-19's pandemic.
So, MS, Parkinson's, dementia.
Yep. The neurodegenerative diseases, yeah, let's visit those with long COVID. Parkinson's is in the list, MS is in the list, Alzheimer's is in the list, and just so you know, there's all published cures for those too. They're in the book. Would you like to know what happens to create these neurodegenerative diseases because of these spike proteins or venoms or viruses?
Tell me.
Okay. The venom binds to what are called alpha-7 nicotine receptors, abbreviated NACHR. That ACHR is important. Do you know what it stands for? Acetylcholine. So these are alpha-7 nicotine acetylcholine receptors. Mm-hmm. When any venom binds to an alpha-7 nicotine receptor, it permanently, while it's attached to that cell, if it's a nerve cell, it blocks transmission of acetylcholine from that previous nerve cell to the next nerve cell where the venom is stuck in between at the nicotine receptor. And they publish that as long as the venom is tied to that, bungarotoxin and cobra toxin in every snake venom research ever, they say as long as that venom is bound to that receptor, acetylcholine, you can supplement it, inject it intravenously, it will never bypass that synapse of those two nerves because venom permanently blocks it until you dislodge the venom. Mm-hmm. Then the acetylcholine works. And this made so much sense to so many medical doctors around the world when they saw Parkinson's symptoms in their COVID patients or vaccine injured or saw MS-like symptoms or Alzheimer's. They would literally start pumping them full of choline or acetylcholine, knowing this is the neurotransmitter that restores all those normal functions. but it wouldn't work. Not until they added nicotine. And the nicotine would release the venoms, then acetylcholine could transfer and communicate with the rest of the body. So you didn't get the tremors of Parkinson's, you didn't get the dementia of Alzheimer's, you didn't get the myriad of neurological symptoms from MS.
But where does the venom go?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So the venom's going to get released, and then where's it going to go? If it's in your nervous system, where's the first place it's going to be released into? Your cerebral spinal fluid.
Right on.
And then where does that circulate to? Out of your spinal cord into where? Into your lymphatics and into your bloodstream.
Which is the detox of the fascia, which causes contraction, and which I'll give you a on-site example. Simone on our team had an MS diagnosis. She just started with us a month ago. Mm-hmm. And just following our protocols and adding nicotine, just today, without any intervention, she came up and says, "This is the first day I've walked normal."
What a miracle. It is phenomenal how the human body is designed.
This is a month, and I'm reporting what she's reported, not that we're prescribing. She has lived our lifestyle, what we do, and there's been a progressive, every day over the last month, change in her behavior and her ability to function.
Let me give you an example of a story. I thought this was awesome. So my wife lost her taste and smell and had roaring ringing in her ears for 2 years after a mild case of a fever for a couple hours during COVID in 2020. But for the next 2 years, she couldn't taste a thing. She couldn't smell anything. And the ring in her ears didn't even allow her to hear the TV, radio, or me sitting at a couch talking to her for 2 years.
So she was really happy?
No. She did not
She's like,
it.
I don't have to listen to this.
No, she didn't like it. But I, as somebody who loves research and has clinically worked with patients for years to help reclaim their health from autoimmune medical diagnoses and other things, it was very frustrating to try to figure out what was going to be the fix for her. And I was trying everything. I even used ivermectin hydroxychloroquine. It didn't work. Nothing ever worked. So 2 years later is when I come across the French scientist nicotine cobra toxin, bungaro toxin study. And I was like, honey, all you gotta do is use a nicotine patch or nicotine gum, it'll go away. And for 3 months, you know what she said? Please don't talk to me about nicotine. I don't want to be addicted to that. I'd go, honey, this is in my own home.
Yes.
Dr. Ardis' own home. For 3 months, I'm like, honey, just do it. Okay, within about 2 months, my Watch the Water documentary comes out, and I list at the very end, the very first antidote to all things COVID I listed was nicotine. That was just the first time anybody'd seen anybody publicly talk about it versus being published in papers. And this the same night the Watch the Water documentary went out, somebody in Australia, a whole bunch of people there were watching it, this medical doctor, who I never met, had actually been diagnosed with permanent hearing loss in her right ear after having COVID, and was told by their hearing specialist that it was caused by COVID and it was permanent. Zero hearing. After watching the COVID-19 Watch the Water documentary, she went to a local pharmacy and bought over-the-counter nicotine gum without ever talking to me. She just went and did it. I don't know her. She goes to buy nicotine gum, comes home, and that night chews one piece of gum. The very next day, because of what happens to her in 45 minutes, she was calling all these media outlets trying to get her story to me. And this podcaster had gotten her info and then shared it with me live on an interview. And she wanted that story read to me. And it was within 30 minutes, I felt air move in and out of my ear for the first time in 2 years. And within 15 minutes of that, 100% of my hearing was restored. My wife was in the house and overheard this interview and then disappeared out of the home. I didn't know where she went. I don't keep track of her that way. She just left. 3 days later, I learned where she went. Because as I'm walking to my bedroom, she's standing in front of me and like blocking me, like not letting me go through the hallway. And I said, what is it, honey? And she said, I have to be honest with you and tell you something. I said, what is that? And she pulls out from behind her a case of nicotine gum she bought at Costco. And I could tell it's open, the box. And I said, wait, have you been doing that? And she goes, yes. I said, for how long? And she goes, for 3 days. And I said, and? And she goes, all my taste and smell is back and my tinnitus is gone. Now, this was miraculous I mean, to me, it's miraculous to be able to free people of something they're told they're going to have continue to experience
Forever,
for a long time. Now, I have to say something. In this book, I share with you what are the 36 known poisons that cause every COVID symptom, every long COVID symptom, and they are going to be the same ones responsible for the vaccine injuries. Why? The COVID-19 technology, the gene technology, is designed to tell your body to make what they call the spike proteins, which would be venoms. Spike proteins are found to be venoms. They're making your body make spike proteins. Got it?
Yep.
Do you know that it is published, and I show you in the book, over and over and over for 70 years or so, they know that any venom protein in a body of a person, a human, who has either been stung by a scorpion sting and had venom of a scorpion injected inside of them, bit by a venomous spider, or actually bitten by a snake and has its venom inside of them, and the person is dying but is treated with antivenom. Even if they survive, do you know what science publishes is the average time span that venom will stay in the human body, wreaking havoc on all of their systems?
14 years.
12.7 to 14 years. Okay, so let me just wrap this up for you, for those of you who are not doing the math right now. We're sitting in 2025. Last year in 2024, the United States government published a document saying the majority of people with these symptoms, 20 million Americans, called long COVID, you're going to suffer for the next 10 years on average with this. I want you to take 10 years from 2024 and add the 4 years prior to 2020. And what's the number? 14. There is a reason the government knows the majority of you are going to suffer with your symptoms for the next 10 to 14 years. Your body doesn't degrade on its own very easily. It takes a long time, but I have answers to all of them in the book.
So when it comes out in the lymph, like you were saying, goes to the spinal cord up into the lymph nodes, how long does it take after that to come out?
Well, I just explained it to you.
Yeah, but I'm talking about if you're
long.
replacing it with nicotine.
Yeah, so you put nicotine in the body releases it. That venom can stay circulating in your body, your lymph system, your bloodstream. Now, let's talk about the lymph. Where does all of the lymph in your body end up before it empties into your digestive tract to be eliminated in your stool? What organ? It's called the spleen. That is the largest lymph node in your body.
So there's a couple things about that. I mean, we see the lymphatic system as the working system for the fascia. We see fascia quite differently. When people do fascial maneuvers, their fascia becomes very loose and very open and very flowing again. I've also, the opposite of that is when the fascia is dehydrated, it causes contracting around the lymph, not allowing fluid to move, which causes pooling of that fluid, which then gets parasitic activity, bacterial activity, and it causes lumps. Just call it that. The populace, because of barium, well, there's a number of things, but one of the big ones is barium and a lot of other chemicals. The body is not able to absorb minerals and process water properly or hold water or get it to the right place. So we have a lymphatic system that we're draining into that is currently dehydrated and can't move because lymphatic requires microcirculation, which is breathing. And this is why I believe that what we're doing with fascial work and these fascial maneuvers are opening up the lymphatic system and allowing this to move. We have the water being able to be replaced, and we have the torsion and microadhesions breaking up so that the lymphatic system starts to move. And you can see it when we do work before and after. When somebody does like a fascial facelift, they look full. There is fluid moving back in their fascia and in their lymphatic system. This is why the combination, I believe, like for Simona, has worked so fast. It's instantaneous. It's 1 month and she's walking again. We have video of her not walking in Austin. We have video of her walking now today and without looking like there's never been a symptom.
It's incredible.
I wanted to tackle a couple topics. Addiction and nicotine, because that's the biggest one that we get, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want to be addicted. So let's talk about that. What are your
Why do
thoughts?
people believe nicotine's addictive?
I have a belief, but I want to hear it. I want to hear it from you.
Oh, it's called propaganda.
Yeah.
And the FDA started in 1994. So in 1994, in April of 1994, the United States Congress invited the 7 heads, CEOs of the largest commercial tobacco manufacturers in America.
I remember
to
that.
testify. I have a video of it on my website.
I remember that so clearly.
The Senate senator or the congressman looks at the 7 CEOs and says, under threat of perjury, we've invited you here to testify under oath to the addictive quality of nicotine. Please state your name and your stance on nicotine. And in unison, one after another, in 25 seconds, every single one of them introduces themselves by names and says this: nicotine is not addictive. All 7 of them.
Yeah.
And then that's in April of 1994. And then in August of 1994, just a few months later, the FDA decides to create an advisory panel of their own. And they decide to declare officially, regardless of what the CEO said, they said nicotine is addictive.
I have found in my own personal use, it is not addictive. I don't find addicted to it anything. If there's chemicals, and we get another one, which is a fair statement. There are patches, and just like there are other things, we've taken and bound chemicals to nicotine to make nicotine bad, but we've done this through a lot of different mechanisms. We take the truth and we make the truth bad by putting other things to it. There are delivery mechanisms, like we promote organic everything. And there are delivery mechanisms, including patches, which deliver nicotine without a lot of, like one of them is like polysorbate 80 and some other really harmful things. There are organic nicotine patches. There is organic nicotine through tobacco that people can drink as a tea, foot soak in. There are ways to get nicotine into your system, which is organic, because that's the first thing that people say. It's addictive, and then they put to the delivery mechanisms. And so I want to really clear up. Nicotine's important, but the delivery system is just as important, because nicotine's accelerating stuff.
And let's talk about the addictive quality of nicotine. Do we know how they perpetrated this idea that nicotine is addictive in tobacco products?
How?
So in 1970, the tobacco giants decided to invite chemists to their R&D labs to help them identify how to make their products more addictive.
Yeah.
And so they told them all you have to do is add a man-made chemical called pyrazines to your tobacco products, and every single cigarette or dipped snuff will be addictive. And Harvard published in 2016 that nicotine alone is not the addictive substance in cigarette or tobacco products. Harvard published in their research study what is the chemicals in tobacco products in America that the FDA allows the tobacco giants to add to their products to make them addictive, and it is not nicotine. And they lay out the 16 names of what they are. And they're called pyrazines.
Yeah. What about, I mean, I know people who they put in chew, they get mouth cancer. Or even in the patches, there's time release chemicals that they use. Is there anything that people should be watching out for if they're looking for a company or looking for a brand? What are they actually, because you don't know what other ingredients they're putting in.
That's very true.
Like we use knickknacks because they're a clean delivery system.
Yeah, there's some pouches companies that actually just take the tobacco plant and they have just shreds of the tobacco leaf inside little pouches, and you just suck on those. There's nothing else in it. So you can get the tobacco from the tobacco plant. And there are many ways to use tobacco, eggplant seeds, tomatoes, potatoes, bell peppers. All these are the plants that have nicotine in them. Remember, you can eat the plants and get the benefit of the nutrient called nicotine. The FDA decided to call nicotine a drug found in plants, just so you know. So it isn't nicotine alone that is responsible at all for the level of addictiveness of tobacco products. That's the great lie, and the FDA refuses to acknowledge that, even publicly. But just want you to know that the delivery system is important, and we have used many times. This is miraculous. Heart conditions are one of the biggest things that reverse almost within minutes of using tobacco products. And we're talking arrhythmias, AFib, tachycardia. You can reverse all of that within 5 minutes by actually steeping tobacco leaf, organic tobacco leaf, in water, and then doing a foot soak. And that has been repeated over and over and over. You can take someone out of AFib in 5 minutes or less with a foot soak in tobacco water.
But sometimes people get like increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, sometimes even headaches. What is that about?
I have no idea. Everybody's different. But I will tell you.
I mean, my view of it is that when you are putting, it's like when you put, I'm not even going to say it right now, but there's an antiparasitic that we recommend that has high silica. It's natural. It's when you add diams and you add earth together, because we get banned for that one, by the way. Antiparasitics, when they come in, it creates headaches and all these things. When you're evacuating toxins from the body, there quite often there's a headache, there's edginess, there's a heart rate increase because your body's working on doing something. Does that sound logical?
Nicotine, by definition, is a stimulant, as a nutrient even. So is caffeine or in guarana. I mean, that would be a stimulant. So these are natural stimulants. There is a dosage of nicotine for all people that will create, the symptom of being on an ocean and becoming very sick. That inner ear is affected by levels of nicotine. So if you get it too high, it will actually create that whole dizzy feeling like you're on an ocean feeling.
We've
So
been
that
testing
can
all
create
doses, and yes, I can. I
You
tested a
tested
new
that
one
one.
this morning, and I couldn't get up.
By itself, it can do that, can trigger that. But
It was actually quite fun.
was it?
Yeah, this morning.
Oh, one other thing. Did you know nicotine is published to improve all cognitive function?
Yes, I
And
do
it
know
is
that.
a nootropic?
Yeah. And
It was defined to be so.
I can completely tell you that because I'd used nicotine on and off over years and different, even back to the clinic. And I can completely tell you that since I've been using it through patches and through like knickknacks, I can tell you that cognitive function, focus and concentration is definitely improved.
Do you know that people think I'm getting paid by big pharma and nicotine companies to talk about nicotine?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things going on around about it.
So I would like to say something.
They're also really cheap.
I would like to say something. I don't own a nicotine product, but I welcome any nicotine company who wants to give me some money.
So if you're a
Go
great
ahead.
company out there, call Bryan.
I have not been approached yet, but I'm absolutely on
But
board.
honestly, it's like $15 for 30
Yeah, it's so
days,
cheap,
like
it's like,
30
yeah.
to 60 days of patches. It's
right.
really, it's not much. But what about the frequency? Like
How
dosage
often?
and frequency, how often? Is it an everyday thing? Is it a 4 days on, take some time off? Is it a totally just based on the person?
I really do love this question. So for every single long COVID symptom period, there was a researcher named Mark Lemke. So this is important on dosage. Anybody out there, buy the book, share it with your medical professional, your health professional. They need this info too to help their other patients who are struggling to resolve their problems. Mark Lemke in January of 2023 took long COVID patients, a whole bunch of them who had had all their symptoms for at least 2 years, but had to have tried prescription medications and physical therapy to improve their long COVID symptoms without any improvement. Mark Lemke asked all these long COVID sufferers to just wear a 7 milligram nicotine patch, which, by the way, over the counter, that is the smallest dose nicotine patch you can buy. And he said, please just wear one of these every day for 6 days. In that research paper I highlight in the book, they state the reason why we asked these people to do this is because of the research in China and France where they had confirmed that the spike proteins of COVID were snake venoms that are defeated with nicotine. So wanted to see if a 7 milligram nicotine patch would resolve any or all of their symptoms that they'd had for 2 years. This was what was amazing. It wasn't half of their symptoms disappeared. 100% of their symptoms disappeared. The majority of all their symptoms they had for 2 years disappeared in the first day of wearing the nicotine patch. No one was asked to wear it longer than 6 days, just 6 days. There were a few people in the group after stopping on day 6 whose nicotine in their body continued to resolve all of their symptoms as late as day 23, and then 100% of all their symptoms were gone in all cases. They waited 6 months before publishing this paper because they wanted to wait 6 months and call those people that were in the study to ask them, did any of your symptoms return? 0 symptoms returned. So in the case of long COVID, this is a specific dose. Published by Science, it's in the medical literature, the NIH has it in their Library of Medicine. I show you the research study, 7 milligram nicotine patches for 6 days. What you should be aware of, and this goes for people with parasites, it goes for people with food poisoning, it goes for people with COVID. You have poisons inside of you or parasites inside of you, and they have to come out. They don't just evaporate. So in the first 3 days of using the nicotine patches, you can look at the graph in the study. When they asked those participants to wear it every single day, a new patch every day for 6 days only, in the first 3 days they report that many of them had viremia symptoms. Now, to explain what that is they saw exacerbations in their long COVID symptoms of fever, chills, tinnitus. They saw it spike, but they said, don't take off the nicotine patch. It'll last for about 10 or 15 minutes and disappear. And in every case, it would go like this for 3 days. Won't. and then it totally leveled off after day 3. So you might have some symptoms as your body's detoxing the poisons that are reactions to your body being aware that these poisons have moved from one part of your body into the other, your spleen, your kidneys, your liver, and your body will kick up fever symptoms, or you'll get diarrhea, or you'll get a rash. Just know these are the ways in which the body eliminates these things. Then for doses everywhere else. I have it on my website at the Dr. Ardis Show. I write it in the book, all these various dosages. I currently am wearing a 3.5 milligram nicotine patch. I buy 21 milligram nicotine patches and I cut them into 6 equal pieces. And I just wear one every day. It's 3.5 milligrams every day is all I wear.
So we've been testing, and I've done 28, I've done 7, I've done 3. I find it really interesting because I love, we are all about human testing, N of 1. The patches are great. The knickknacks and the oral, because of the way the delivery mechanism. I was doing an event and I had patches on. Somebody gave me a full 6 milligram oral one. I got out in the middle of the event and I realized I'm slobbering on myself. But I like to try stuff because I know it's not going to hurt.
So can you please tell the audience what's the actual dose if you want to drool? Go.
The dose if you want to drill is 14 in a patch and 6 in the mouth.
Yeah, I can only do like 1 milligram at a time. I'm like, okay.
But there's
some people are very sensitive.
There's a reason, and this is what I love about what you're doing and why we've added these recommendations, and we're going to more fully add the recommendations. Is we've been helping people with their health. We've been giving them guided solutions based on our own experience, and we have literally millions of people with hundreds of thousands that have reported medical reversals of diseases, of every disease you can imagine, from Parkinson's all the way through to autoimmune diseases, to children with blastomas, just on our recommendations. This is before nicotine. And by adding, and we believe it's because we're reducing stress in the body, increasing flow in the body, which I know you agree with. So fascial maneuvers reduces stress, increases flow, 7 to 10 minutes of its 75 to 90% of the biological stress. Increasing the flow and now adding the nicotine, it's accelerating the process of healing to an insane level. And that's why I wanted to have you back. Because there's a message that needs to be heard here. And again, the way that they've done this through propaganda is tell a big lie, tell it often. So what we're going to do is tell a big truth, and we're going to tell it often. And that's what we're good at. We're good at it because we have people that are okay with the N of 1 experiment. They don't need a peer review to try something, and they report the results. And this is what's starting. This wave is going all over the world right now.
If I can explain why I believe that in 1994 the FDA started lying to us about nicotine, is I believe they've been bought and paid for by the big pharma, the FDA.
Yeah.
And I believe that since 1994, they were told to make sure the entire American society believes that nicotine is addictive and causes cancer and tobacco products, so avoid them. And at all costs, make sure that's avoided. Because the majority of a lot of autoimmune diseases and cancers are blamed on what? And neurological diseases. On viruses.
Viruses, yeah.
Well, nicotine is actually published to almost resolve every single symptom created by every single published virus known to man in science, which is why I wear a 3.5 milligram nicotine patch every day. I will for the rest of my life.
I've been doing it, having fun, and this, you just touched on something which I don't think we want to go too far in, but organizations that have been designed to supposedly protect us, and that's being broken down right now. I know there's an effort. The people in government, it's a system. It takes a while to move because it's also public opinion, but the Center for Disease Control wasn't always the Center for Disease Control. It was also, before that, known as the Center for Data Collection. And there are these big holes and these big avenues where we have believed in institutions. One of the things that we have is 85% of care, just 75 years ago, was delivered by moms and by grandmothers in the neighborhoods. They're community-derived care mechanisms. And when something was beyond that, they would go to a doctor. And 100 years ago, very few people had access to a doctor. What we have now is 85 to 95% of care being delivered by single source, which is institutional. And what's scary about that is that the average person, the average community, no longer knows how to handle the situations. They may even have a remedy, but they're scared to use it. They're scared that their bodies aren't going to be able to handle it. What happens if this doesn't work? And they default into that centralized care. And our mechanism is to expose, to inspire people through our own example, to start believing in their body's own ability to heal again. And I know that you're a natural practitioner and you believe that. And what we have been telling people is, it's a fishbowl. This is water we're in. Our air is poison and toxic. Our houses are toxic. The air outside is toxic. The water is toxic. And in these little increments, I see a lot of people that are supposedly healthy, doing all the right things, and they're sick right now, or not well. And it's because it's death by 1,000 cuts. And what we can do is step by step start making these changes. We have a program as a 28-day reset that takes people through a journey, and it starts getting them to move their fascia, but it starts educating them about these simple mechanisms, where the toxins are coming from, how to clean your environment. We put all these guides up for free. And this is where it starts. It starts with us taking personal responsibility. I can't look to a centralized source, and at some point, even though that we have all this data, I still have to try it out. And like you suggest, do the research. Go look at it yourself, because the fear is so intense. And when the body starts having a problem, our first response is, oh my God, I'm going to die. And that's actually not the case. I have found that the human body in its right condition is virtually indestructible, but it also needs the right conditions.
It does. All right, so I don't know how much time is left, but I would really love for you to ask me the question you were going to ask me earlier, remember?
Yeah, well, I have two questions on them. One other one came up, and then I'll get to that one. It's interesting because I typed in, like, I was like, oh, I want to pull up more ideas about you and like research and stuff like that. So I typed in and had to do a big comb of like, what are the criticisms about this Bryan Ardis guy? Like, what is the problems with him? What's wrong with him? And it's funny because the only thing that I could spit out or come up with is like, well, he's a chiropractor, and scientists say his science is not accurate. That's all it could say. It couldn't come up or pull up like, hey, based on this particular study, this disproves his particular study. The criticisms were only literally like, the general thing when you try to attack someone is like, well, other scientists say he's wrong and he's not a doctor.
That's right. So let's address those people, shall we? All right, number one.
It's just kind of a funny thing because there's no counter. The argument isn't about what he's actually saying. It's just to say like, well, he's not this. And,
don't attack.
And
if you can't attack the science, attack the person.
Scientists don't say, but which scientists? And then if scientists did the studies that you're quoting, which you're only quoting.
Yeah. Could you imagine other religions telling Christians, you can't believe in a Christ, he was a carpenter. That's what you're doing when you're saying I'm a chiropractor. It's weird. Yeah. Okay, listen. I am American, and I was raised to understand a language called English, and then I was also taught how to read English. And everything I say to you is written in English, and I read those research studies, and then I tell you what they say, and then I show them to you. So I'm really sorry that you can't come up with other reasons why you shouldn't listen to me, but you should probably go read what I'm showing you. And if you know English, or can use Google Translate if you don't understand, then he goes, translate it from English into your language, and you'll know exactly what I'm reading. It's amazing. So anyway, I'm glad you couldn't find much more than that.
Yeah, it was just funny because I was like, I wonder what kind of criticisms or what kind of studies or what kind of things have been shown to disprove what you're saying.
Well, the best part of what you're actually quoting lots of other peer-reviewed scientists. So it's not that, I mean, you're saying it, but you're actually saying it in conjunction with evidence that the world is accepted, but just not looking at.
Do you know what else I find really sad is how many of these researchers in these 5 different countries that have confirmed all the findings I keep quoting you, how bashed they are by the medical community and being told that their research isn't adequate or sound. And that's the way to dismiss it.
Yeah, for sure.
Or they're from another country.
Attack. We get it a lot.
That's ridiculous.
From another country.
We get it a lot. I'm particularly fond of the attacks.
But there is one huge thing that I think most people have not grasped at all and is overlooked, underappreciated, that science has already confirmed about why COVID created COVID symptoms, why anybody carried lingering symptoms, why some people maybe got a fever for a couple hours and disappeared and had no other issues, why some people in the family didn't get anything, and then why it is that some people after getting vaccinated continue to be worse. There's only one thing that's causing all people, regardless if it's long COVID or vaccine injured, continues to have their symptoms. Do you know what that is? And what's causing them to continue to be sick?
What?
And if you would just go look, you'll find it in 100% of them, and then wipe it out, and then it will stop. COVID-19 was created with a tech, and I said COVID-19, I did not say the vaccines. COVID-19 was created with a technology called DNA plasmids that were created by a guy named Dr. Stanley Cohen. Over 75 years he's being funded by our government to produce something called DNA plasmids. And I'm really sorry, you've all heard that the vaccine injuries are caused by something called mRNA and the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines. There is no mRNA in any of the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines. Our United States government has published instead what is in it. They tell you they didn't put mRNA in there. They tell you also in their documents, we didn't put any of the COVID-19 virus in those vaccines either. Then they illustrate and describe to you what they put in there. And it is what explains the reason why everybody has long COVID symptoms still, and why anybody is COVID-19 vaccine injured and they are still seeing those lingering effects or worsening effects. And it is because if you don't read the research on DNA plasmids, your medical doctors will never know what's wrong with you. This is why they had to call them mRNA vaccines. It's like a false flag. You'll go look for mRNA research, you won't see there is any, because there isn't any, especially for this type of work. But if you go look at the technology that is in there, it's called DNA plasmids, and there's 75 years of this information. The people who got sick with COVID had DNA plasmids introduced into their body that made their body produce the spike proteins of COVID. You were the bioweapons manufacturing facility, and they used this genetic technology called DNA plasmids to make your body and organisms in your body make the poisons called COVID. So when somebody in a house got sick and the other people didn't, guess what the people who did had in their body? They had E. coli bacteria, Enterobacter bacteria, or yeast or brewer's yeast living in their bloodstream or in their bowels. And the DNA plasmids that they called COVID, the virus, and the DNA plasmids in the COVID-19 vaccines, when they inject that inside of you, it can, the DNA plasmid, it can get into human cells, it's published to do that, and can make your human cell produce mRNA of king cobra venom. I show you the research studies, they've been doing this since 2002. They know they can make human cells and mammal cells produce cobra venom that will ultimately kill the mammal.
That's wild.
They also know, though, that it is much easier for bacteria and yeast that live in the blood and the bowels of specific people. That the bacteria and the yeast that have naked DNA, meaning there is no nucleus capsid around it to protect it inside the cell of the bacteria or the yeast, the bacteria and yeast draw in the DNA plasmid. The DNA plasmid is a ring. The ring separates and becomes just a string, and the end of one of those strings binds to their end of their double helix DNA, and it programs the bacteria and yeast to produce the venom spike proteins in your body forever, as long as that bacterium lives. What feeds bacteria and yeast in the human body?
Wow, sugar.
Sugar does.
Sugar.
Who had the worst outcomes from those who got sick with COVID-19 and died? What group of people died more than any others?
And
40% worldwide were diabetic.
I mean, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but basically the outcome of the industrial complex is to create diabetes at the end of it. That's really what they're trying to do.
Yes, it is exactly what they're doing.
That's a whole other conversation. We'll take this at another time, but that is the outcome, because that is the one thing that they can guarantee across the board will infect, reinfect, keep sick all along, and that's why sugar is so dangerous. We have a product called Fascia Sweet, which is a glycine-based plant-based sweetener, 0 calorie, regulates blood sugar very, very quickly. And for me, even by using that over a period of time, it tastes like sugar, works like sugar, bakes like sugar. It kicks the body does not accept sugar after that. That's one of the strongest things that we have. It's powerful. I mean, that is the underlying, isn't it?
So everybody who's sick with long COVID or vaccine injury, just know you have bacteria and yeast in your body or in your bloodstream that has been programmed and genetically altered or genetically engineered to produce poisons inside of you that internally make you sick.
Yeah.
Now, what's the key to this? Blood sugar handling is a massive key, right? Because that will help assist with the die-off of the bacteria and the yeast if you can drop your blood sugar down. However, there is something published that wipes out these types of E. coli bacteria, Enterobacter bacteria, and the yeast that actually are programmable by DNA plasmids. And people around the world should know what that is. Because if you just threw nicotine into them, that would release the venoms being produced by the bacteria, the yeast. Mm-hmm. Does it kill the bacteria, the yeast?
No.
No.
So what is it?
So you've got to kill the bacteria, the yeast. It is most published that black cumin seed oil wipes out those bacteria and yeast that create it, both the candida, both the brewer's yeast, both the enterobacter, and the E. coli, which is why 2 years ago I released a formulation of an organic product with the key ingredient, black cumin seed oil. It's called Biodefense. Now this is important. Black cumin seed oil, for all of you around the world, if we're trying to provide hope, human garage audiences, just know, did you know that the bird flu H5N1 that they're talking about right now is running around the country and around the world possibly? Yeah. Do you know that they published in 2013, and again our NIH published in 2021 during the COVID-19 pandemic, that black cumin seed oil is a cure for this H5N1 bird flu?
It's a good thing we take it every day.
It's a good thing you take it every day. So you might want to make sure you have these kind of things in your arsenal. Another thing that's very important, not all people will be cured with nicotine. Do you know why? If they have long COVID or COVID vaccine injury? There's some people that will use it and they're like, it didn't do anything.
Yeah.
There are published by DNA lab results from 5 different countries that there's a combination of not just nicotine targeting venom proteins in every COVID-19 patient, but in the blood, urine, and feces of every COVID-19 positive patient was a combined 20 different snake venom proteins from 20 different snakes and 16 different venoms from marine shell creatures in the ocean, 1 starfish and 15 cone snails. When you look at the graphs out of these research studies produced by the DNA lab results, when you look at the protein name of all of these, the majority of them target nicotine receptors. Like 20 plus of them do, wow. But the other ones do not. And they instead target other things like blood cells, and they will make them stick together, causing blood clotting. So if you have blood clotting factors related to COVID, or now you're being put on Eliquis, heparin, warfarin, or Coumadin, it's because you have blood clotting factors in your blood unrelated to nicotine. But those venom proteins called spike proteins of the others in those charts perfectly explain why you have blood clotting now or blood thickening in your body. And do you know that there are 3 published all-natural cures to those venom-induced blood clots and have been known for decades?
What are they?
And would you like to know what some of those are? Because people at home should know what these are. When you try nicotine and think it's going to cure your blood clots, it's not. These 3 things do. N-acetylcysteine does it and has been published to do so since 2006. Licorice root extract is the second. And inside of licorice root is something that the American supplement companies like to be told by the FDA to remove, which dissolves those blood clots. It's called glycyrrhizin acid. So when you're buying licorice root, make sure you do not buy a licorice root extract that has DGL written on it. DGL means it's been deglycyrrhizined. They took it out. That's 90% of all licorice root extract in America. I wonder why.
Is there a brand?
There is many brands. I will tell you,
Okay, what we'll do is we'll grab the brands. We'll grab the brands. We'll send them out with some of the information. We're gonna grab some facts from you, and we're gonna send it out to people who request.
And then the third plant is actually cinnamon cassia, which is the most often purchased cinnamon. It actually has in it, cinnamon was found by Louis Pasteur's Institute in the 1800s to contain a chemical in it, cinnamon, that they called coumarin, and found out that it would dissolve all blood clots created by snake venoms in the 1800s. And then he hired chemists to replicate that isolated component of cinnamon. And once they were able to successfully do that and package it, they decided to change the name of the nutrient they called coumarin and put a D where the R is. And now you have the prescription drug called Coumadin.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yes. So these are just some basic things. Now, just brands-wise, Me and Dr. Ed Group at Global Healing created a product called Foreign Protein Cleanse. The second ingredient is licorice root extract. The fourth ingredient is the cinnamon cassia. And the plant extracts we combined in that are all organic from around the world to address all the proteins that were found that are foreign to the human body that cause all COVID symptoms. That's why we called it Foreign Protein Cleanse. It addresses the neurotoxicity of venoms for all COVID patients and vaccine injured. It addresses the blood impact of those proteins and the organ failing, called cytotoxic effects of all venom proteins, all combined into one. And it was our effort to try to actually produce something that would help us annihilate these venoms, in combination of which were 36 different ones. And then we also have individual recommendations based on the patient's symptoms, and we outline them in the book. And then there's other brands too. Mountain Rose Herbs is another great licorice root.
Yeah, and there was a question from the audience about vaccine shedding.
The shedding is a principle that I think is very important that everybody grasp, okay? So I have a question for you. We talked about things being passed on earlier. Can things really be passed on?
No.
Okay. Have you ever seen or heard of a woman who had a vaginal yeast infection share that yeast infection with their sexual partner, and that man end up with jock itch or jock rash?
Yes.
Yes. So did that yeast pass to that guy? You better believe it. All right, so I'm sorry, physically things can be shared, and I've seen it. I've even experienced it. Okay, I've got it. All right, so I just told you.
You said you got it now?
No, not now. Have you seen me scratch? No, I'm totally comfortable in my jeans and my denim. Okay, I would not be wearing denim if that was the case. Okay, so this is what's important.
Yeah.
If you got COVID, you have bacteria and yeast in your body, and if you have long COVID, you have bacteria and yeast in your body that are producing these poisons. If you've been vaccine injured, you have bacteria and yeast in your body that have also been programmed, and Candida is one of those. E. coli is one of those. Can you share bacteria in your mouth with someone you kiss?
Yeah.
Yes. So if I had E. coli bacteria in my mouth that had been programmed to produce poisons, and I make out with you, dude, could I pass it to you? Yes. Now, it would just be a little bit of E. coli bacteria. It would be a quick kiss. Okay, just a little bit. Then you're going to go off at some point, you're going to eat vegetables, fruits, or something that has sugar in it. And is that bacteria going to self-divide? As long as you feed it is. And as that one genetically engineered bacterium self-divides, it's going to be a perfect clone. And guess what they are engineered to do? To produce spike proteins, which are venomous poisons. Over time, you're going to have the exact symptoms those people had, and yet you didn't get the vaccine.
Yeah.
Black cumin oil.
Black cumin seed oil. The shedding is you are transferring bacteria and yeast sexually, breast milk, intercourse-wise, with people around you. You can share it that way. This is why if a mom reported during COVID-19, got the vaccine, and had a baby they were nursing, did you hear the reports around the world that these little girls, 6 months to a year old, would start having menstrual cycle-like blood clots passing?
Yeah.
That's because it was those bacteria and yeast were being shed, as they wanted to call it, from the breast milk into the baby.
Yeah.
And is there sugar in the breast milk? There better be. That baby needs it to live. So as this is being introduced and spread from one person to another, passed to the next person, it's usually in an intimate setting, you will see this shedding effect. However, how do you wipe that out and get rid of that? Black cumin seed oil.
Yeah.
Is an antidote.
Yeah, I mean, that answers the shedding issue because, again, this was like, it's shedding, and then you have this story, like there's 7 patients in a waiting room, somebody comes in, they all get it. These are just anecdotal stories that are being told. It's like Jaws, don't go in the water. These are just to scare populace.
Amen.
Yeah. Is there any other
do you know what else sheds in real life and in nature?
Skin cells?
Snakes.
Snakes.
They shed every year.
Oh, interesting. So, is there any other questions right now? I mean, we've...
symbology of the snake all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I just had a fun one, but...
Yeah, go on.
Ask a fun one.
That's a fun one. I'm entirely serious one.
Yeah,
What's your
well,
birth sign, bro?
I saw in the comments that it's Certificate of Vaccination ID 2019. Do you know much about that?
Well, when did the vaccines come out?
2019? Well, they came out later, but they were prepping them already.
Yeah. I actually, many times people ask me, what does that mean? I actually think I actually have seen what they've written. Coronavirus infectious disease 2019, because of in the fall of 2019. I've heard that too.
Yeah.
When I discovered the cobra venom, cobra toxin connection, I was like, maybe this stands for cobra venom infectious disease 2019. I was just making it up because I have no idea what they did.
I do have one interesting observation, which I always love to share with people. Within 2 to 4 weeks of the lockdowns, all over the world, every park had signs that were made out of metal. They had signs and graphics and stickers in every store, and telling you where to go and all that. And all of the companies that make signs were shut down. So I always ask people, how long do you think it would take to produce signs to pepper every store and every public? Like if you took every printing plant in America, every printing press, and they were open, how long would it take to do that? And it is significantly longer than 2 weeks.
I have a hard time getting labels printed within 2 days, 3 days.
Also, how much fiberglass, like clear fiberglass, has been produced in 2 weeks? That's like in front of every cash register at every store, in between every booth in every restaurant. Yeah. It must be or plexiglass, I guess is what it's called.
Yeah.
How much plexiglass is there in this world?
This is really quick, but do you think that all of the testing was just DNA testing?
Yes, actually, y'all should watch Dr. Lee Merritt's work. She's actually taken the PCR genome sequence that they actually say represents COVID-19 to be positive for a PCR test, and she puts it into this genome database. And when you put it in there, it flags that every human being has like 20 samples of that genetic code inside of them, and Homo sapiens.
I mean,
like,
a PCR test,
yeah.
if you run it up to 40, 60 cycles, you're going to start seeing everything that's in our genome, that right down to Ebola.
How many people do you think actually know more about the PCR test than the inventor?
Yeah, he said that.
And what did he say about viral infections and its ability, the PCR test, which he won the Nobel Prize for, that he invented?
Yeah,
what did he say about it being able to diagnose a respiratory virus?
You cannot.
You cannot.
Yeah.
Okay. Why would we believe anybody else who
Well,
says
no,
it does?
he's dead. He's dead. He's dead now.
He's dead.
But
he's
he's
dead,
on
so science is
recording.
wrong.
Yeah.
It's on record
Yeah, I get
where
it,
he's
I get
correcting Anthony Fauci.
But other scientists
before he
say,
dies.
that his research was just like,
Yeah.
and he was probably a chiropractor.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to know what I learned? That for 30 years before COVID-19, do you know what PCR tests are wait, what is the word? Uniformly used in a particular type of research to confirm protein gene sequences in
Snakes.
snake venom research. 100% of the time uses PCR testing.
It's
Oh, do you know what?
It's unfathomable the amount of deception, and
Do you know what the first PCR test that was approved by the FDA in January of 2020 was named? Its actual brand name.
Cobra.
Cobas R. They actually took the R out of it. That goes into Cobras.
Yeah, you can't make that.
And that is made by the Holland de Roche company.
Yeah,
Anyway.
you can't make that up. So Bryan.
Wait. Do you know what the DNA plasmid company that manufactured for the United States government all the DNA plasmids for the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines, do you know what the name of their company is?
What?
That produced all the DNA plasmids that make your body make cobra toxin and bungaro toxin.
What is it?
And other venoms. It is called Cobra Biologics. And I show you in the book.
You can't even get it. So
press
Bryan,
release.
we could go on and on and on. I want to thank you for coming out and spending that time. We would like to extend the information that we've learned here in a more formatable way to our base of people all over the world that are asking. I like to put some of the list, make it very easy in a single sheet, list the research, list the recommendations in a scaled down version. Not everybody's going to be able to get or read the book, and a lot of people don't have the patience or tolerance, especially when they're sick. I encourage people to buy the book. It's been unbelievable information. You've dedicated your life to this. I think that it feels like the tides are turning. Censorship is turning. Awareness is coming up. I just really appreciate you coming out here, flying out here to spend the time with us. There is going to be a few more talks that we're going to have over this because we have the ability to get a message out. And I believe in the goodness of people, and people are starting to share this and share the results. And what we have is we also have a programmed audience that talks about their results publicly, which is really cool. So with what you're doing and what we're doing together and our programs, adding in the recommendations, it's going to radically shift people, and in so many ways, not just around the virus. And it's because people generally are infected with this problem, and we can make a difference. And I appreciate you immensely for what you're doing, the flack that you've gone through to get to this point, the publishing of the book. I'm super excited about the next couple of years.
Yeah, what do you've got coming down the pipeline? What's going on next? Or just continuing to tour, talk?
We have travel plans throughout the entire year all around the globe, and that'll be exciting. A lot of people are excited about the nicotine discussion, but I am most excited to help free people from the bondage of their suffering, which is actually the majority of your symptoms are unnecessarily there. So I just want to say, I'll finalize this. Thank you for inviting me here. Thanks for letting me feel like the odd one out without the Human Garage T-shirt. Everybody else seems to have one. They're sitting here at this table. So I guess you know. I guess you know who the invitee is. It's me.
This is the guest. If you
Next
You
time.
figured out who doesn't belong. It's me. But I do want to say this. Okay, we have been conditioned throughout our entire adult lives, all of our lives, at least since I've been born in 1976. We have been conditioned to believe that each of your symptoms are actually only treated with a prescription medication or a drug. I just need you to all remember something and think to yourself. Use some common sense because you have it. Everybody does that's watching this. Take some time and sit quietly for a second, and I want you to consider for yourself really, truly. Think of every symptom the human body can experience: a fever, a cough, a joint pain, diarrhea, a headache. Think of any symptom, a rash. It doesn't matter what the symptom is. If you have a symptom, you have been conditioned to freak out and think you're going to die and go to the emergency room and get a drug for your symptom. I want you to tell me, Human Garage, any of you, if you can you name one symptom or one medical chronic illness, think of them all, that is actually caused by a prescription drug deficiency?
Not one.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a question then. If it's true that not a single symptom or a single disease is caused by a prescription drug deficiency, why do we all run to the pharmacy and to our medical doctor to get a prescription for a drug for our symptoms? Why do we do that?
It's programming. We firmly believe in the body's ability to heal, give the body the resources, step out of the way. I mean, our whole program, even the supplements we recommend, they reduce inflammation, proven, scientifically proven, reduce inflammation. Like our Power Kirk 30 NF-kappa B signaling absolutely eradicates it, uses the heat shock protein MSK1. We take down blood sugar, we remineralize the body. That's the foundation of what we do. Because when you give the body the tools, it will do the job. And like you have been saying today, the body is the pharmacy. And when we take a drug, no drugs can make you higher or cure you, but the body will cure itself. And it just needs the right combination. And the right combination is not more, it's less.
So I only give that perspective because I want everyone around the world to start seeing the potential that's inside of them, that you are a natural, what I believe God created, amazing part of this universe and this nature we call Mother Nature, and infused in all of nature
Yeah.
is the cure and the sustenance this human body needs. And as long as we stop poisoning it and get out of the way and move the body can heal.